Hello everyone, you're very welcome to this episode of Universal Design for Learning. In this episode we're going to look at the idea of differentiated instruction. It's an idea that complements Universal Design for Learning a lot, and I think there's something to be gained by thinking about differentiated instruction in the context of UDL. So the arguments for differentiated instruction is that no two students are alike, and no two students learn in an identical way. Therefore, if we create an environment that suits one student, it's not necessarily an environment that suits other students. So in the classroom, it's important that we empower students to think for themselves. Where differentiated instruction differs from universal design for learning is what it says is create a range of content exactly like UDL, but decide which students should get which content on the basis of their particular needs or abilities, whereas universal design for learning says create the range of content but give it to everyone and give everybody the freedom to do it. But I think the dimensions and the advice and the principles of differentiated instruction are very useful, and I think we could create content using differentiated instruction models and then simply make all the content available to all the learners, and then we're getting close to achieving a nice model of UDL. So the philosophy is curriculum goals can be similar for all students. The methods we use in the classroom can be varied for the individual needs of each different student. And learning should be differentiated to make it effective. So as I said, that means creating different pathways depending on students' abilities, interests, or learning needs, so that everybody will have an equal way of absorbing the content. I mentioned this before in learning styles, that my belief is if we teach content to students in a manner that best suits them, that's excellent in terms of their performance, but it doesn't allow them opportunities to create learning strategies or learning skills that they need for content that challenges their abilities. So I really like the idea of creating content that suits people's needs, but I also like the idea of creating content that they hate, because it's like olive oil or castor oil or something like that. It's not nice, but it's good for you. And sometimes you have to take broccoli or things like that because it's good for you. And sometimes you have to take content in a way that isn't congruent with your particular learning preferences because it's good for you, because you develop a range of strategies and skills as a consequence of that. But nonetheless, the philosophy of differentiated instruction says if we empower students and give them good problem-solving skills, make them independent learners, that's a good idea, and we can't disagree with that. And if we can facilitate more opportunities for peer learning, because peer learning is often considered many factors, many times more effective, sometimes to a factor of 5, people give that as a number, than teacher-to-student learning. So the 3 key characteristics of differentiated instruction are that a range of materials are used to support what's being taught. So not only lectures, but acts, concepts, generalizations, principles, attitudes, and skills. We can vary all of those things in a manner that's most congruent to a particular student's preferences. Crucially, and we talked about the idea of alignment last week, and this is just basic good principles of education, the idea of constructive alignment, that we align all the tasks and objectives to the learning goals. So we shouldn't be doing activities that have no link to what the content is, and we should always reference back when we're in the middle of stuff to our overall goal. Otherwise, we sometimes get into a bit of concept drift. So if we can see what the objectives are to hit our goals, then we can allow the students, if we make that visible to students, then we allow them to be able to manage their own progress through the milestones to achieve a particular learning goal. And the other thing is that instruction is concept focused and principle driven. So instructional concepts are in general broad. Paint the broad picture first, and then get the students to fill in the detail themselves. So that means giving a lot of faith to your students, giving a lot of trust to your students, It means giving a lot of responsibility to your students. And I suppose the problem we always are concerned about is it works for the stronger students, but can we create a scaffolded, a supportive environment sufficiently good to ensure that all students benefit from this and all students will be able to achieve what's being set out? That doesn't mean all the students pass the subject, but it simply means that they all have an opportunity to succeed. So there's 4 different approaches to differentiated instruction. There's a number of diagrams that explain them, but I think simply this: we can differentiate the content, we can differentiate the process of teaching, the products of teaching, or we can differentiate the environment in terms of the classroom and how we teach. So differentiating the content is simply this: if a student already knows everything about your module, then they should get an exemption from it. There's no point having them doing a subject that they're already knowledgeable about. So I guess we have a process that we can recognize prior learning, and then we can exempt students from modules if they submit some kind of documentation as well as an essay or some activity. And that's a really good idea, because there's no point having a student in the room who really understands exactly what's going on, because it's just boring for them. Differentiating the process, so that is changing around what activities and strategies, what the students are being required to do, make a video, create an infographic, whatever it is that we're asking the students to do, that we change around the process of teaching and their process of learning, so that maybe we send them out on a field trip, maybe we ask them to build a sculpture to represent whatever they're doing, whatever it is, that we change it around so that I guess a range of students' needs are addressed. That does, of course, mean that the students are required to interact and often work in groups. And sometimes how this works is the teacher does a bit of an introduction, then the students work in groups, then the students bring back and show what their group has done, and different groups can be doing different kinds of activities. I suppose we'd see great parallels between this and the idea of project-based learning or problem-based learning. Differentiating the product essentially means, I guess the best way of saying it is, for the Leaving Cert, people might do pass or honours. So that's what we're saying here. Weaker students might need to have reduced performance expectations. So they might be doing a pass paper, or they might stay to do an ordinary degree, whereas the stronger students might go and do the higher degree. So just that we have those ladders of opportunity in our structures, in the structure of our qualifications, that if a student can't succeed higher up, that at least they get a qualification for whatever they're able to do. That's and in a non-stigmatizing way as well, of course. That's really important. So no matter how much variation and no matter how much support we give a student, if the students aren't able to, for whatever reasons, succeed, that they get recognition and are able to exit with some kind of qualification is important, and that they have that choice and they're aware of that from the start. And then the final one really is to accommodate individual learning preferences. So one way a lot of the differentiated instruction literature talks about this is through learning styles, and they talk about particularly the done and done model, Gardner's idea of multiple intelligences, and any of the young models, the Myers-Briggs type indicator or the Keirsey temperament sorter. We'll obviously put another health warning on this and say, in terms of educational research, there doesn't seem to be a significant impact in terms of performance, whether you use learning styles models or not. But nonetheless, again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Maybe not a big deal for the student, but for the lecturer, in terms of thinking about a range of learners and thinking about how they might produce content that will be congruent with the needs of different learners. I think that learning styles are a nice idea in that sense. But I definitely think to go back for a minute and to consider differentiating the content, the process, the product, and the environment of a classroom can be extremely effective in terms of how it enables a range of learners to succeed in an environment. So thanks very much. We'll see you on the next episode.